The first time Noah saw her, she was sitting alone in the university library, her eyes buried in a thick book about astronomy. She wasn't flashy like the others, didn't dress to catch attention, and she barely looked up when people passed by. To most, she would be invisible, but not to Noah. Noah was the kind of guy everyone knew, smart, confident, always surrounded by a group of loud friends. He didn't just walk into a room, he owned it, but for once, his attention wasn't on parties or plans for the weekend. It was on her. His friends noticed. "Hey, I bet you couldn't get her to go out with you," chuckled Tyler, nudging Noah's arm. Noah smirked, but didn't answer. That silence was dangerous. It meant he was already thinking. That's when the dare was born. Get the quiet girl to fall for him in 30 days. Prove he could make anyone love him. Her name was Elara. The next day, he made his move. He sat near her in the library, not too close, just enough to make it clear he was interested but not intrusive. When she looked up, surprised, he gave a small smile and said, "Hi." She hesitated, unsure whether to reply. People didn't usually talk to her unless it was for help with assignments, but something about his tone was gentle, respectful. "Hi," she replied softly. That was the start. At first, Noah thought it would be easy. Compliments, kind gestures, casual conversations. He had done it 100 times before. But Elara was different. She didn't laugh at forced jokes. She didn't melt at flirty smiles. She listened. She observed. She asked deep questions, ones that caught him off guard. "What do you believe in, more logic or love?" she once asked, staring at the sky during a walk. He paused. No one had ever asked him something like that. I used to believe in logic," he said. "But lately, I'm not so sure." Their conversations got longer. She talked about stars and dreams and how lonely the universe must feel without someone to share it with. She confessed how people often overlooked her, how she felt like a shadow in crowded rooms. "I don't think anyone sees me," she admitted once. "I see you," Noah said quietly, and he meant it. Days turned into weeks. The bet, once clear in his mind, began to fade into the background. He found himself looking forward to seeing her, not because of the dare, but because she made him feel something real. He started noticing things he'd ignored before: how she pushed up her glasses when she was nervous, how she smiled at stray cats on the street, how she lit up when she talked about the stars. One night, after walking her home, she turned to him with a puzzled look. "Why are you doing this, Noah?" He froze. "Doing what?" "Being nice to me, spending time with me. I'm not like the others." He didn't know how to answer. He wanted to say something clever, something reassuring, but all that came out was, "Because I want to." She nodded slowly, but her eyes searched his face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. That night, the weight of the bet hit him harder than ever. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. What had started as a game was no longer funny. It wasn't a joke. It was Elara, and she was real, beautiful, brilliant, and he was falling. The next day, his friends pressed him. "So, how's the bet going?" Tyler grinned. Noah didn't smile back. He stood up, grabbed his bag, and walked away. He knew what he had to do. Noah didn't sleep that night. The guilt had rooted itself deep inside him, growing heavier with every moment he spent with Elara. He tried to justify it at first, telling himself it was just a silly dare, a harmless game. But the truth was, far from harmless now. It was turning into something cruel. He had to tell her. The next afternoon, he found her in her usual spot under the big oak tree near the science building. She was sketching something in her notebook, constellations maybe, or a dream she hadn't shared yet. Her face lit up when she saw him, and that only made it harder. "We need to talk," he said, his voice quieter than usual. She immediately looked concerned. "What is it?" He sat beside her, hands trembling slightly. "There's something I have to tell you, and it's going to hurt." She closed her notebook. Her fingers folded in her lap, calm but braced. "Okay." Noah looked at her, really looked at her. The girl who had trusted him, opened up to him, shown him a softer world. And now he was about to shatter that. "When I first started talking to you, it wasn't because I noticed something special about you. It was because someone dared me. A bet. They said I couldn't get you to like me." She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just stared at him, as if waiting for more. "And then something changed," he continued. "I started wanting to be around you, not because of the dare, but because of you. You made me feel things I didn't think I could feel. You made me question everything. I'm sorry, Elara. Truly. She looked away then, not in anger, but in thought. I knew something was off, she said finally, her voice steady. It felt too sudden, too perfect, but I let myself believe it was real. It is, he said quickly. It became real. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being a game for me. But it started as one, she whispered, more to herself than to him. The silence between them stretched long and thin. The wind rustled the leaves, and somewhere nearby, students laughed, unaware of the moment unfolding under the tree. I don't know what to say, she said at last. You betrayed me. I know, he said, and I'll regret it every day. She stood up slowly, brushing off her skirt. Her eyes were moist but not broken. I need time, Noah. I can't pretend this didn't happen. He nodded. Take all the time you need. She walked away then, not looking back. And Noah sat there, hollowed out and alone, wondering if he had just lost the only person who had ever seen the real him. The next few days were torture. She didn't reply to his texts, didn't show up at her usual places. She disappeared into the folds of the campus like a shadow. And Noah felt the absence like a knife. He stopped hanging out with his old friends. The jokes didn't land anymore. The parties felt fake. The things that once excited him felt empty. All he could think about was her and how badly he had ruined everything. But Elara wasn't hiding. She was healing, alone, yes, but not broken. She went back to the things that made her feel grounded, her telescope, her books, her music. But the crack in her trust lingered like a bruise beneath the skin. Then one evening, she found something on her doorstep, a box. Inside was a collection of little things, a hand-drawn map of their favorite walk, a star chart with her name marking, a constellation, a letter written in shaky handwriting. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I wanted you to have these memories, the real ones, because even if you can't forgive me, I'll never forget what we had. She read the letter twice, then a third time. Her heart ached with a strange mix of betrayal and longing. It would be easier to shut him out completely, to walk away and never look back. But a small part of her, the curious, brave part, still wanted answers. 2 nights later, she found herself standing in front of the same oak tree. Noah was already there waiting. He looked thinner, quieter, like someone who had finally faced himself in the mirror. I don't expect anything, he said when he saw her. Not forgiveness, not love. I just wanted to say thank you for showing me who I could be, if I tried. She studied him carefully. The mask he used to wear was gone. There was no smug grin, no polished charm, just honesty and pain. I'm not ready to forget what you did, she said. I understand, but I'm not ready to throw away what we had either. A flicker of hope lit up in his eyes, but he didn't move. You don't get to fix this with a few words and pretty gifts, she added. If you want me in your life again, you have to prove that you've changed. Slowly, truthfully. I will, he said, even if it takes the rest of my life. She nodded once, then turned to leave. But this time, she looked back, and for the first time in weeks, they both smiled just a little, because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something real. Noah didn't take Elara's words lightly. He knew trust was something fragile, especially after being broken. So, he didn't push. He didn't flood her with messages or grand gestures. Instead, he focused on becoming the man she saw glimpses of, the version of himself that had once made her smile under the stars. He started showing up not in flashy ways, but in quiet, consistent ones. He joined the campus science club, not to impress her, but to learn. He began volunteering at the community observatory where she often visited. He listened more, talked less. For the first time in his life, he wasn't trying to win someone, he was trying to deserve them. Elara noticed. She saw him standing quietly in the back of astronomy sessions, scribbling notes, asking real questions. She saw him help a younger student fix a broken telescope without bragging about it. And slowly, something inside her softened. Weeks passed. Their conversations returned not as lovers, not yet, but as something gentler, realer. They talked about the universe again, but this time with both feet on the ground. One evening, under the same oak tree, she asked him, "Why didn't you just move on?" He looked at her with calm eyes. "Because you're not someone you move on from. You're someone you grow up for." She didn't reply right away. Instead, She looked up at the stars. The same stars that had once brought them together were still above them, patient and vast, and as the night deepened around them, a sense of something unspoken settled between their hearts, a quiet understanding that maybe love isn't about perfect beginnings, maybe it's about choosing the hard path when it's the right one, maybe it's about healing together, and maybe just maybe this time, the stars were on their side. The weeks turned into months. Noah and Elara found themselves orbiting each other in a new kind of rhythm, delicate, uncertain, but real. They were no longer strangers, no longer a couple either. They were something in between, something still growing roots. Noah never tried to label it. He understood that words weren't enough anymore. Trust had to be rebuilt in silence, in actions, in the spaces between sentences. One day, Elara invited him to join her for a weekend trip to the mountains. It wasn't a date, she made that clear. I just don't want to go alone, she'd said. But he knew it meant more than that. It meant she was giving him a chance to be near her again. They drove up winding roads in his old car, the radio humming soft music neither of them really listened to. For the first time in a long time, the silence between them wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. To the cabin, surrounded by tall pines and crisp mountain air, Elara seemed more at ease. She talked more, laughed more. There were still moments when she would go quiet and drift off in thought, but now Noah knew not to fill those silences. He let them be. He let her be. On the second night, they lay on the roof of the cabin with blankets wrapped around their shoulders, looking up at a sky full of stars. Elara pointed out constellations, her fingers tracing the shapes like they were old friends. I used to look up at the stars to feel less alone, she said softly. And now? He asked. She turned her head to look at him. Now, I think I look up to remember that even after darkness, there's light. He swallowed hard. You've always been my light, Elara. I just didn't realize it in time. She didn't respond right away. The stars above them flickered silently, timeless and patient. I'm still afraid, she said finally. So am I, he admitted. But I'm not going anywhere. I'll walk with you through the fear. She closed her eyes and leaned her head against his shoulder. Not a promise. Not yet. But it was something. Back at school, things were different. People had stopped talking about the bet long ago, but Noah hadn't. He still carried it with him, not as a shameful memory, but as a reminder, a lesson. He turned down party invites and chose quieter nights. He started tutoring students who struggled in classes he used to breeze through. He didn't do it for credit or praise. He did it because Elara had taught him to care about things that mattered. One afternoon, while they were studying together at the cafe near campus, Elara looked at him with a thoughtful expression. I don't think you're the same person anymore. I'm trying not to be, he said. No, she said. I think this is the real you. The one you buried under charm and noise. He smiled. Maybe you're right. They studied in silence for a while. Then, as they were packing up, Elara reached across the table and took his hand. It was the first time she'd touched him in months. I'm not promising forever, she said quietly. I'm not asking you to, he replied. Just now, just us. She nodded, her hand still in his. For the first time, the distance between them didn't feel like a canyon. It felt like a bridge, and maybe, just maybe, they were already crossing it. That night, as Noah walked her home, he realized something. Love isn't fireworks or grand gestures. It's not about who says the right words or makes the most dramatic moves. It's in the moments when someone chooses to stay even when it would be easier to walk away. When they reached her door, she turned to him and asked, would you have still fallen for me if there hadn't been a dare? He paused, not to think but to feel. I didn't fall for you because of the dare, he said. I fell for you in spite of it. She looked at him long and searching, and finally gave a small smile. Good answer. She didn't kiss him. Not yet. But she didn't close the door right away either. And that was enough, because sometimes love doesn't need a loud declaration. Sometimes, it just needs time, patience, and the courage to begin again. Be why now, Noah and Elara had become part of each other's lives again, but with careful hands and quieter hearts. They still walked slowly, sometimes pausing to make sure the other was keeping up. It was no longer about rushing into love. It was about discovering it one step at a time. They had coffee every Tuesday morning before class, like a ritual. They didn't call it a date, but both of them showed up without fail. Noah learned how she liked her coffee black with 1 sugar, and she learned he secretly hated cinnamon but pretended to like it when she offered him a cookie. little things began to stack up between them like building blocks. Notes tucked inside textbooks, a shared playlist, a surprise cup of tea during a rainy lecture day. No declarations, no pressure, just presence. One Friday evening, Elara invited Noah to her apartment to help her fix a leaky faucet. It wasn't romantic, but Noah showed up anyway, toolbox in hand, sleeves rolled up like he was ready for a battle. The repair took all of 20 minutes, but they ended up talking on the couch for hours. She told him about her childhood, about her mother, who used to dance in the kitchen, and her dad, who taught her how to spot planets with a telescope. He told her about his brother, the one who dropped out of college and vanished from the family map, leaving behind silence and confusion. It messed me up, he admitted. Made me think I had to be perfect, or I'd disappear too. Elara didn't try to fix it. She just listened, and for Noah, that was more healing than any advice. At one point, their hands touched. This time, neither of them pulled away. Still, the past lingered like a quiet shadow. Some nights, Elara would go distant, lost in thought, and some days, Noah caught himself wondering if she was just being kind, if maybe deep down she couldn't trust him again. But they didn't let those thoughts win. Instead, they faced them together. They started a new habit, writing notes to each other and slipping them into a glass jar they kept on Elara's shelf. No one else knew what was inside. It was their secret. The first note Noah wrote said, "I like the way you say Nebula like it's a song." Elara's reply, a few days later, "I like the way you stopped pretending to be someone else." It wasn't grand. It was slow. It was quiet, but it was real. Then came the night of the campus winter festival. Lights strung across trees, music floating through the crisp air, and students laughing, wrapped in scarves and excitement. Elara wasn't sure she wanted to go, but Noah convinced her. "You don't have to stay long," he said. "Just long enough to drink bad cocoa and hear good music." She agreed. They wandered through booths of handmade crafts and silly games. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. Being there together was enough. Eventually, they reached the stage where a student band was playing slow, steady songs. Elara stood still, listening, her breath visible in the cold night air. Noah watched her, and something in him stirred. He turned to her, voice low. "Can I ask you something crazy?" She glanced at him, a smile twitching at the corner of her mouth. "Depends how crazy. Dance with me. Here. Right now." There were couples already dancing in front of the stage, but she hesitated. "I don't know how." "I'll lead," he said, and she let him. He pulled her gently into the circle of his arms, and they swayed, not perfectly, not elegantly, but honestly. People passed by, some smiling, some not noticing. But to Noah and Elara, the world shrank to just the music and each other's warmth. Halfway through the song, Elara whispered, "I don't want to be afraid anymore." He looked into her eyes. "Then don't be. I'll be right here." When the song ended, they didn't let go. Not right away. She leaned closer, her head resting against his shoulder. "I think I'm falling again," she murmured. His arms tightened slightly. "Then let's fall together. But slow this time." She nodded against his chest, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the past, not the mistakes, not even the fear. Because sometimes, love returns not as a thunderstorm, but as a quiet rain, soft, steady, and full of life. And this time, they weren't pretending. They were becoming. The winter months passed slowly, wrapped in the hush of cold air and long evenings. For Elara and Noah, everything changed without needing to be announced. There was no grand moment where they declared they were back together. No dramatic kiss in the rain. Just a quiet unfolding like petals opening to sunlight. They became us without saying the words. Noah would walk her home without asking, and she'd wait for him at the cafe without telling him she would. Their friends started to notice, but no one said much. Maybe everyone sensed that this was something delicate, something earned. One Saturday morning, they went to the observatory together. The sky was unusually clear, the kind that made Elara feel like the universe was holding its breath. She brought out her favorite telescope, the one her father had given her when she was 13. "Here," she said, adjusting the lens for him. "Take a look." Noah bent down, one eye squinting through the viewfinder. "Whoa. What do you see?" "Something beautiful. Something far, far away." She smiled. "You're looking at Andromeda. It's the closest major galaxy to ours." He looked up at her, that boyish grin still lurking beneath all his growth. "And still impossibly far. That's how I used to feel," she said. Like I was always just out of reach. He didn't say anything. Instead, he reached for her hand. You're not out of reach anymore. They stood there for a long time, hands clasped, looking up at a universe so much bigger than their problems. The sky didn't judge. It just listened. Later, back at Elara's apartment, she asked if he wanted to read some of the jar notes they'd written over the months. Are we ready for that? He asked, half teasing. More than ready, she said. They opened the jar and spread the notes across the rug like fallen leaves. One of hers read, sometimes I still think about the day you told me the truth. It hurt, but I also think about how you didn't hide. One of his read, you make me want to stay. I've never wanted that before. Some notes made them laugh inside jokes, scribbled thoughts from late nights and tired mornings. Some made them pause, hearts clenching with the memory of the journey they'd taken. But none of them brought regret. As they finished the last note, Elara looked at him and said, I think we made something beautiful. He nodded, and it wasn't easy. It shouldn't be, she said. The best things never are. That night, they cooked dinner together for the first time. It was chaotic. Noah nearly burned the pasta, and Elara dropped a spoon into the sauce, but they laughed the whole way through. It felt like home, even if neither of them said it aloud. Afterward, they curled up on the couch, a blanket over their legs, the soft hum of music playing in the background. I used to think love was all about perfection, she said quietly. The right person, the right words, the right moment. And now I think it's about choosing someone, even when things aren't perfect. Especially then. He turned to face her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I choose you every day. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him soft, slow, certain. It wasn't their first kiss, but it was the first that meant forever. Noah stayed the night, but not for any physical reason. They fell asleep on the couch, her head resting on his chest, his arm around her like a promise. Outside, snow began to fall. The kind of snowfall that blankets the world in silence and peace. Morning light crept through the curtains, and for the first time in a long time, there was no weight between them. No past hanging over their heads, just warmth, just trust, just love. They were still learning, still healing, still growing, but they were doing it together, and that made all the difference. Spring arrived quietly. The frost melted, trees unfurled, new leaves. The university campus bloomed with color, and everything around Noah and Elara seemed to breathe again. Life moved on, but this time, they were moving forward together. They didn't need to define their relationship anymore. It was felt in the way Noah instinctively took Elara's hand when they crossed busy streets, or how she brought him tea when he was buried in books at the library. It was in the way they made space for each other, no longer out of guilt or fear, but from care, from love. One bright afternoon, they walked past the oak tree where everything had begun. The memory of that moment lingered. His confession, her heartbreak, the silence that followed. He stopped, looking up at the branches now heavy with green. Do you ever think about that day? He asked softly. All the time, she replied. But not the way I used to. How do you think of it now? As the day everything broke, so something better could grow. He smiled at her. You're good at that, finding meaning in the mess. She nudged his shoulder. It's a survival skill. A week later, Noah got an invitation to speak at a student-led seminar on ethics and social psychology. At first, he laughed at the irony. Him, talking about ethics? But Elara encouraged him to do it. You have something important to say, she told him. You've lived the consequences. That matters more than theory. He stood nervously in front of a crowd of 50 students, palms sweating, heart pounding. But when he began to speak, his voice steadied. I used to think people were challenges, he said, that emotions could be played with, that connection was a game. And I hurt someone because of that, someone who didn't deserve it. But she showed me what real strength looks like, what love actually means. Not grand gestures, not words, but patience, growth, forgiveness. He saw Elara at the back of the room, her eyes steady on his. He didn't need applause. Her smile was enough. After the seminar, a few students came up to thank him. One girl said, that was brave, owning up to it like that. He just nodded. It's the least I could do. Later that night, back in Elara's apartment, he found something taped to her refrigerator. A photo of the two of them, laughing in the kitchen, surrounded by pots and spilled flour. Beneath it, she'd written, real, honest, ours. He turned to her, surprised. "When did you put this up?" "Today," she said, crossing her arms. "I think I'm done being afraid." He took her in his arms and held her close. "Me too." They stood there in the kitchen, the place where they'd burned toast and danced barefoot, where laughter and forgiveness had mingled for months. And then softly, he said, "Can I ask you one last question?" She looked up. "Sure. Would you still have loved me if it hadn't started with a lie?" She took a moment, then nodded. "Yes, but I think I love you more because it didn't stay a lie." That night, they read through every note in their jar again. Then, with a new pen and a new piece of paper, Elara wrote the final note. This was never just a bet. It was a beginning disguised as a mistake. "I'm glad we didn't run from it." They sealed the jar, not to hide it but to keep it, a reminder of where they started and how far they'd come. Outside, the stars shone clearly, brighter than before, because some stories don't begin perfectly, but the ones worth keeping, they begin with truth, survive the storm, and become something unforgettable. And for Noah and Elara, their story had only just begun.